The ocean is not empty space. We tend to think of it that way, as a void, a black abyss where light dies and sound fades into nothingness. We imagine it as a blank canvas where distance is the only barrier. For decades, the superpowers of the Cold War treated the deep ocean as a sanctuary. It was more than just a hiding spot. It was a religious experience for the men who served there. It was the one place on Earth where a machine weighing 4,000 tons could vanish completely, where a weapon capable of ending civilization could hide, undetectable, untrackable, waiting for the order that everyone prayed would never come. But the ocean is not a void. It is a medium. It is a living, shifting, physical entity. It has temperature gradients that act like mirrors. It has pressure layers that crush steel. It has memory. When a submarine moves through the water, no matter how silent its engines, no matter how perfectly designed its propeller, it leaves a scar. It pushes the water aside. It heats the molecules in its wake. It disturbs the ancient, layered stillness of the deep. For 20 years, the United States Navy believed that silence was invisibility. They built an entire doctrine, an entire fleet, an entire philosophy of warfare around the suppression of sound. They became the masters of the whisper. They believed that if you could not be heard, you could not be seen. This belief bred a specific kind of arrogance, a God complex, born of technological superiority. But in the spring of 1972, in the warm, salt-heavy waters of the Mediterranean, that hubris was shattered. The Silent Service discovered that they were fighting an enemy who had learned to stop listening with their ears and start feeling with the water itself. This is the story of how the invisible became visible. This is the story of the trap that changed underwater warfare forever. March 17, 1972, 03:37 hours. The Eastern Mediterranean. The water here is old and dense, carrying the salinity of a closed sea. 140 miles south of Rhodes, the seafloor drops away into jagged canyons and silt-filled trenches, a chaotic acoustic environment where sound bounces and refracts in unpredictable patterns. Suspended in this blackness, hovering at a depth of 420 feet, is the USS Greenling, hull number SSN 614. A Permit-class nuclear attack submarine, she is the apex predator of her generation. Commissioned in 1967, she was designed for the specific, high-stakes conditions of the Cold War. Her hull is a teardrop of high-tensile HY-80 steel, capable of withstanding crushing depths. Her reactor is a marvel of pressurized water engineering. But her most important weapon isn't the torpedoes in her tubes. It's the BQQ-2 sonar suite wrapped around her bow like a giant, sensitive ear. Inside the control room, the atmosphere is a mix of boredom and supreme confidence. The air is thick with the smell that every submariner knows, the metallic tang of ozone from the electrical breakers, the heavy scent of machine oil, and the recycled staleness of air that has been breathed too many times by 100 men living in a steel tube. It is the smell of confinement, but to these men, it smells like safety. Commanding Officer Guy H.B. Schaefer stands in the red-lit gloom. He presses the vintage headphones tight against his ears, shutting out the low hum of the ventilation fans, shutting out the quiet breathing of his crew. His world has narrowed down to a single phosphorescent green display. For 43 minutes, Schaefer has been tracking a ghost, a Soviet Victor-class submarine, a hunter-killer, nuclear-powered, fast, and dangerous. The Soviet boat is running northeast at 11 knots, heading for the Dardanelles, presumably returning to the Black Sea after a Mediterranean patrol. To the untrained eye, the sonar screen is just a chaos of static, a waterfall of green noise cascading down the glass, interspersed with biological noise, the click of shrimp, the distant moan of whales. But to Schaefer, and to the sonar operators hunched over their consoles, it is a sheet of music. The Victor isn't trying to evade. The Soviet captain is steaming comfortably, confident in his solitude. He has no idea that the Greenling is there. The American boat is drifting in the Victor's baffles, the cone of deafness directly behind the Soviet sub's propeller, where its own cavitation noise masks everything else. It is the perfect blind spot, the sniper's perch of the deep ocean. There is a thrill here, a dark, voyeuristic pleasure. The Greenling hasn't flooded her tubes. This isn't combat. This is something far more delicate. This is intelligence collection. Every machine has a voice, a unique mechanical fingerprint. When a propeller shaft rotates, it hums at a specific frequency. When a cooling pump cycles on, it vibrates the hull. When steam rushes through a turbine, it sings. These sounds, these tonals, are distinct. If you record them, if you analyze them, you can identify a specific Soviet submarine by name just by hearing a few seconds of its engine noise. You can tell if a bearing is worn. You can tell if they are running at full power or cruising. The Greenling is a thief. She is stealing the Victor's acoustic soul. Reel-to-reel tape recorders spin silently in the sonar room, capturing every revolution of the Victor's screw. This data will go back to naval intelligence. It will feed the massive computer banks at SOSUS stations, the sound surveillance system that lines the ocean floors. It is the kind of patient, methodical work that wins wars without firing a shot, building a library of sounds that allows the U.S. Navy to track the Soviet fleet across entire oceans. "Khan, sonar," the operator whispers. The voice is calm, detached, trained to strip away emotion. "Contact bearing 287, range approximately 8,000 yards. Course 045, speed 11 knots. The operator adjusts a dial, refining the gain to cut through the ambient noise of the Mediterranean. "I'm getting clear tonals on the 50 Hz line. Reactor coolant pump signature is consistent with Victor 1 class. Confidence is high." Schaefer nods. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. The crew knows the drill. The Greenling is ghosting. Her own reactor is dialed down to minimal power, operating on natural circulation. This means the noisy main coolant pumps are shut down, relying on the physics of hot water rising to circulate the coolant through the core. The crew moves in socks. Hatches are secured with agonizing slowness. In the galley, no one is cooking. The clatter of a pot or the slam of an oven door could travel for miles in these acoustic conditions. They feel invincible. They are the hunters. They are the unseen watchers. They are the masters of the game, looking down on a clumsy adversary who doesn't even know he is being watched. "Sonar, Khan," Schaefer whispers. "Are we recording all frequencies?" "Affirmative, sir," comes the reply. "Reels are running. We're getting everything from 20 Hz up to 2 kHz. Signal-to-noise ratio is excellent. This is the cleanest Victor signature we've ever captured." Time in a submarine is measured in shifts of the watch, in the slow consumption of oxygen, in the rhythmic rotation of the magnetic reels. The hours crawl past. 0400, 0410. The initial thrill of the hunt has settled into a rhythmic trance. The tension is there, but it is a familiar weight, a comfortable pressure that keeps the mind sharp. The Greenling maintains her position, adjusting depth and speed with agonizing slowness to stay in that blind spot. They are tethered to the Soviet boat by an invisible thread of sound, a dangerous dance where one wrong move means collision or detection. But at 0412 hours, the rhythm breaks, and with it, the comfort evaporates. "Khan, sonar. Contact is slowing. Blade rate decreasing." Schaefer moves to the plotting table. The red light casts deep shadows in his eye sockets, making him look like a skull. A slowdown? Why? A flicker of doubt enters the control room. A submarine slowing down in open water is suspicious. It could mean they've reached a patrol station. It could mean they're preparing to rise to periscope depth to communicate with Moscow. Or it could mean something much more dangerous. A crazy Ivan. A clearing turn. A sudden, violent turn to check the baffles for trailing spies. If the Victor turns now, the Greenling will be exposed, or worse, rammed. "All ahead 1/3, Schaefer orders. "Maintain current depth and course." The The Greenling slows, matching the Soviet boat's deceleration. But the Victor doesn't just slow down. It stops. The propeller beats fade. The rush of water over the hull ceases. The Soviet submarine is hovering, maintaining depth through precise ballast control. It is sitting in the water, silent, listening. The tension in the Greenling's control room spikes. The air suddenly feels hotter, more claustrophobic. The crew exchanges glances, quick, darting looks of unease. When a target stops, the game changes. The background noise of the ocean seems to drop away. Now, the Greenling's own noise, the faint hum of her electronics, the blood rushing in the captain's ears, seems deafening. The sonar operator stares at the waterfall display. The bright lines that marked the Victor's machinery have faded to the baseline. But baseline isn't silence. Even a stopped nuclear submarine is alive. Circulation pumps, cooling systems, the subtle creaks and groans of a titanium pressure hull adjusting to the crushing weight of the sea. 5 minutes pass. 10. 15. The two submarines hang in the dark water, miles apart, like two duelists holding their breath. The Greenling is listening to the Victor. The Victor is listening to the ocean. Schaefer stands motionless behind the sonar operator. He barely breathes. He wills his boat to be part of the water, to be nothing, to be a hole in the sea. He knows that at this range, a dropped wrench, a slammed hatch, even a loud conversation could alert the Soviet boat that she isn't alone. The silence is no longer a shield. It is a weight. It is pressing in on them, heavy and suffocating. And then, the trap snaps shut. The sonar display doesn't flicker. It erupts. "Con, sonar. I have 2 new contacts. Designate Sierra 2 bearing 195, Sierra 3 bearing 340. Schaefer freezes. 2 contacts? Where did they come from? The ocean was empty 10 minutes ago. A cold knot forms in his stomach, the primal realization that he has lost control. Identify. Both contact diesel signatures, the operator reports, his voice rising an octave, cracking with the stress. Foxtrot class. Sierra 2 is close. Range approximately 3,000 yards. Sierra 3 is closing from the north. The blood drains from Schaefer's face. He looks at the plotting table. The geometry is undeniable. While the Greenling was fixated on the Victor, hypnotized by the prize, 2 Soviet diesel submarines had been creeping into position. Diesel boats are old technology. They run on batteries when submerged. They are slow. They have limited endurance. But on battery power, they are incredibly quiet. And these 2 hadn't been searching. They hadn't been patrolling. They had been positioning. They were waiting. "Sonar con," Schaefer barks. "Are they pinging?" "Negative, sir. Passive only, but they're definitely tracking us. Sierra 2 just increased speed. She's closing aggressively." The realization hits Schaefer with the force of a torpedo impact. The Victor wasn't the target. The Victor was the bait. The Soviet nuclear boat had sailed down this corridor, making just enough noise to be tantalizing, luring the American spy boat into the kill box. And now, the Greenling is bracketed. It is a classic pincer movement, executed in 3 dimensions. The feeling of superiority vanishes, replaced by the sickening vertigo of the prey. Schaefer's mind races through the tactical manual. He has a nuclear reactor. He has unlimited power. He could cavitate the screw, go to full power, and outrun the diesels. He could be miles away in minutes. But running means noise, massive, deafening noise. If he runs, he reveals the Greenling's maximum speed. He reveals her acceleration curve. He reveals her acoustic signature at high power. If he runs, the Soviets, who are undoubtedly recording right now, will get exactly what Greenling came to get from them. The hunter becomes the hunted. The intelligence advantage evaporates. Schaefer makes the hard choice. He chooses vulnerability over exposure. "Rig for ultra-quiet," he whispers. "All non-essential systems secure. Reactor to natural circulation." The orders ripple through the boat. Ventilation fans wind down to a stop. The air grows still and stagnant, the temperature beginning to rise. The reactor cooling pumps, the heart of the ship, are shut off. The coolant continues to flow only by the physics of thermal convection. Hot water rising, cold water falling. It is quieter, yes, but it pushes the reactor dangerously close to its thermal limits. The Greenling becomes a hole in the water. She drifts, banking everything on the hope that the Soviet diesel boats can't hear her over the sound of their own electric motors. But deep down, Schaefer knows hope is not a tactic. As he watches the sonar traces of the closing Soviet submarines, seeing the lines on the screen draw closer and closer, he realizes with sickening certainty that the Soviets aren't guessing. They aren't casting a wide net. They know exactly where he is. The Greenling, focused on her intelligence collection mission, patient and methodical, and completely convinced of her own stealth, has sailed directly into an ambush. The silence in the boat is now absolute, but it is the silence of the grave. Office of Naval Intelligence, Suitland, Maryland, March 24, 1972. 1 week later. The debriefing room on the 4th floor has no windows. The walls are lined with acoustic insulation that swallows voices, making every conversation sound conspiratorial. The fluorescent lights hum with a low, irritating buzz that seems to amplify the headache forming behind Captain Richard Haver's eyes. Haver sits at the head of the table. He is surrounded by data. Stacks of fan-fold computer paper, magnetic tapes, and classified patrol reports are spread out like a coroner's report. The atmosphere in the room isn't just tense, it is angry. There is a palpable sense of denial, a refusal to accept the realities staring them in the face. "Gentlemen," Haver begins. His voice is flat. He is a man who deals in facts, and the facts he is about to present are terrifying. "We have a pattern." He slides a folder across the polished wood. It is stamped with red diagonal stripes. Top secret, Umbra. Item 1, February 8th, USS Gato. Conducting acoustic intelligence collection on a Soviet Echo II class submarine in the Norwegian Sea. Gato was detected and bracketed by 2 Soviet diesel submarines. They were positioned as if expecting American surveillance. Gato broke contact, but the mission was compromised. A second folder joins the first. The sound of the paper sliding on the table is the only noise in the room. Item 2, February 23rd, USS Flasher, north of Iceland. Collecting signatures on a Soviet November class, detected by a Soviet counter-surveillance operation. A Victor-class submarine was positioned specifically to delouse the November, to detect trailing U.S. boats. Flasher evaded, but intelligence collection was terminated. And then, the third folder, the Greenling report. Item 3, March 17th, Eastern Mediterranean. Greenling walks into a coordinated diesel trap. The Victor she was recording was deliberate bait. The room is dead silent. The officers present, men from the submarine force, from the CIA, from the NSA, look at the folders. They understand the implications immediately. For 20 years, the U.S. Navy has operated on one fundamental assumption. Soviet submarines are loud, and American submarines are quiet. This acoustic asymmetry was the cornerstone of Western security. We could hear them leaving port. We could track them across the Atlantic. We could trail them for weeks, recording their secrets, and they would never know we were there. It was a godlike power, the ability to see without being seen. But if the Soviets know? If the Soviets can predict where American boats will be, if they can coordinate complex ambushes, then the game is over. The silent service is no longer silent. The question before us is fundamental, Haver says, looking each man in the eye. Are the Soviets detecting our boats through improved sonar capabilities? Or do they have advanced knowledge of our operations? Are we facing a technical breakthrough or a security breach? A submarine officer speaks up, his voice sharp with defensiveness. He cannot accept that his machines have failed.
Our boats are quieter than anything the Soviets operate. The Permit class uses acoustic rafting. We float the machinery on rubber mounts. We use natural circulation. Soviet sonar is garbage compared to ours. They shouldn't be able to detect us at these ranges. It is a desperate plea. He is begging for the failure to be human, not mechanical. Unless, Haver says quietly, dropping the bomb, unless they know where to look. If they have our schedule, if they have our orders, they don't need better sonar. They just need to wait. Naval Security Group Activity, Northwest Suitland, April 3, 1972. The investigation is given a code name, Operation Holy Stone Review. The man in charge is Commander James Bradley. He is a career spook, 14 years in signals intelligence and communication security. He is the kind of man who looks for patterns in chaos. And now, he is looking for a traitor. Bradley sets up shop in a secure vault on the 3rd floor. He is looking for the how. How does an enemy detect the undetectable? He starts with the technical hypothesis. Maybe the Soviets built a super sonar. Maybe they made a quantum leap in hydrophones. Maybe they have deployed a new SOSUS-style network in the Mediterranean.
But the scientists from the Naval Research Laboratory shake their heads. They analyze the Soviet equipment from photos and stolen manuals. The verdict is clear. Soviet sonar is years behind. Their systems are crude. They lack the signal processing power to pull a quiet American sub out of the background noise of the ocean. Acoustically, the Greenling should have been invisible. So, Bradley turns to the second option, the one that keeps him awake at night, the one that makes him look at his colleagues with suspicion. The mole. The FBI is brought in. The atmosphere at headquarters turns poisonous. Counterintelligence teams begin to scour the personnel records. They look for sudden wealth. They look for unexplained travel. They look for the telltale signs of a man living a double life. Bradley reads every message, every order, every communication log involving the compromised submarines. He traces the flow of information. Who knew Greenling was going to the Mediterranean? Who knew Gato was in the Norwegian Sea? The list of names is huge. Hundreds of people handle these orders. Watch officers, cryptographers, administrative clerks. But as weeks turn into months, the investigation hits a wall. There is no smoking gun, no missing documents, no Russian radio sets found in a basement. The American submarines are being found, but there is no spy. Bradley is frustrated. He is exhausted. He sits in the vault, surrounded by the ghosts of failed missions. He feels the weight of the entire submarine fleet on his shoulders. He reads the patrol reports again, looking for a mistake, a procedure violation, anything to explain the impossible. Greenling maintained ultra-quiet status, reactor on natural circulation, crew at rest. They were silent. They were doing everything right. And yet, the Soviets knew. The investigation is documenting a mystery, not solving one. The United States is fighting blind against an enemy who, impossibly, has learned to see in the dark. The paranoia is corrosive. If it's not a spy, and it's not sonar, then reality itself seems to be breaking down. The answer, when it finally comes, doesn't come from a spy hunter. It doesn't come from a sonar expert. It doesn't come from an interrogation room. It comes from a librarian. August 12, 1972, CIA Headquarters, Langley, Virginia. Dr. Ellen Harper is an analyst in the Directorate of Science and Technology. Her job is unglamorous. She reads open-source Soviet scientific literature. She translates boring academic papers from Moscow State University and the Leningrad Shipbuilding Institute, papers that usually gather dust. She isn't looking for submarines. She is looking at basic physics research. But on a humid afternoon in August, she notices a trend. Starting in the late 1960s, Soviet physics journals began publishing a flurry of papers on hydrodynamics of submerged bodies. She reads one, then another, then 10 more. The papers discuss the behavior of stratified fluids, liquids that are layered by temperature and density, like the ocean. The papers describe what happens when a large object moves through these layers. They discuss internal waves, disturbances that propagate between the warm surface water and the cold, deep water. They discuss Kelvin wakes. The Soviets aren't writing about sound. They are writing about wakes. Harper types up a memo. It lands on Bradley's desk 2 days later. He reads it, and for the first time in 6 months, the knot of paranoia in his chest begins to loosen, replaced by a cold, intellectual awe. He reads it 3 times, letting the paradigm shift sink in. The Navy had been asking, how do they hear us? The Soviets had asked a different question. What does a submarine do to the water? Bradley immediately convenes a technical review panel. Oceanographers, physicists, and submarine warfare specialists gather in the briefing room. They look at Harper's findings. The conclusion is a shock to the system. It is a moment of profound humility. They've been playing a different game, one oceanographer explains, pointing to the translated papers. His voice is hushed, respectful of the adversary he had underestimated. We've been obsessed with decibels. We spent billions making our engines quiet. But a submarine is a 4,000-ton steel tube. When it moves through the water, it displaces mass. It pushes water out of the way. It's simple physics. He draws a diagram on the chalkboard. This displacement creates internal waves, pressure disturbances that ripple out for miles. It's like the wake of a boat on the surface, but it happens underwater, between the thermal layers. Even if the sub is perfectly silent, the wake is there. And there's more, another scientist adds, tapping a report on Soviet sensors. Heat. A nuclear reactor is a tea kettle. It boils water to make steam. That heat has to go somewhere. We discharge warm water into the ocean. That thermal scar trails behind the submarine like smoke from a chimney. It stays there for hours after the boat is gone. The room is quiet. The realization is horrifying, yet clarifying. The Greenling wasn't detected because she made a noise. She was detected because she existed. The Soviet bait submarine, the Victor, wasn't just driving around aimlessly. It was a mobile sensor platform. It was equipped with experimental probes measuring temperature changes to the thousandth of a degree. It was measuring minute pressure fluctuations. It was dragging a sensor array through the water, looking for the thermal scar of the American boat trailing it. The Soviets realized that you don't need to hear the engine. You just need to feel the disturbance in the force. While the Americans were perfecting the art of silence, optimizing for acoustic stealth, the Soviets had mastered the physics of the medium. They had turned the ocean itself into a sensor. They weren't looking for the submarine. They were looking for the hole in the water where the submarine used to be. The mystery was solved, but the solution revealed a terrifying new reality. There is no such thing as invisibility.
September 8, 1972, the Pentagon.
Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, the Chief of Naval Operations, holds the final report in his hands. It is 15 pages of bad news. Zumwalt is a reformer. He has pushed for the new Los Angeles-class submarines, boats designed to be the fastest, quietest hunters in history. He has staked his reputation on American technological dominance, but this report tells him that quiet isn't enough anymore. It tells him that the Soviet Union, often dismissed as technologically backward, has outflanked the U.S. Navy through sheer scientific creativity. The recommendations are drastic and immediate. Operational procedures must change immediately, the report states. Submarines must operate at deeper depths where thermal wakes dissipate faster. Speeds during intelligence collection must be reduced to minimize hydrodynamic displacement. We must assume that in certain ocean conditions, particularly strong thermoclines, we are visible regardless of our noise level. But the most painful recommendation is psychological. It is a demand for humility. For 25 years, since the USS Nautilus first went to sea, the U.S. Navy walked with a swagger. We owned the deep. We possessed a technological superiority that felt permanent. We were the ghosts. Now Zumwalt has to draft a message to the fleet that admits vulnerability. It is a painful admission. He writes a sentence that will change the mindset of every submarine commander in the U.S. Navy. The ocean is not empty space where submarines operate invisibly. It is a medium that records the passage of vessels through thermal, hydrodynamic, and magnetic signatures that persist long after acoustic signatures fade to silence. This was the end of the era of impunity. The innocence of the silent service was lost. The invisible war had entered a new phase. It wasn't just about who had the quietest pumps. It was about who understood the ocean better. It was about thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, and the chaotic nature of water. The Soviets, lacking the microchips to build better computers, had used their strength in theoretical physics to flank the Americans. They couldn't build a better ear, so they built a better skin.
November 3, 1972, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The USS Greenling glides into the harbor channel. She has been at sea for 6 months. Her hull is stained with algae. Her crew is pale, bearded, and exhausted. But it's not just physical fatigue. There is a heaviness in their eyes. They have just completed a 53-day intelligence patrol under the new rules. Captain Schaefer's patrol report reads differently than before. There is no swagger. There is only caution. Operating in a state of constant tactical awareness, he writes, every maneuver conducted with the awareness that we may be observed. The Greenling was successful. She brought back tapes of 8 Soviet submarines. The acoustic library continues to grow. The SOSIS arrays continue to listen. The great game continues. But the psychological character of the operations has changed. The crew moves differently now. They know that the deep water, once a sanctuary, is hostile. They know that out there, in the crushing dark, there are sensors that can feel the heat of their engines and the pressure of their hull. They know that they leave a trail. They know that the ocean remembers them. They know that silence is necessary, but it is no longer sufficient. The investigation into the Greenling incident was officially closed in December 1972. The final report was stamped top secret and buried in a vault. It concluded that there was no spy. There was no traitor. The failure was not one of security. It was a failure of imagination. The United States had looked at the submarine problem and seen an acoustic challenge. The Soviet Union had looked at the same problem and seen a hydrodynamic one. It is a lesson that echoes far beyond the Cold War. In technology, in war, in life, we often become obsessed with our own strengths. We optimize for the variables we understand. We build thicker walls, quieter engines, faster computers. We assume the enemy sees the world the way we do. We assume we are safe because we are strong. But sometimes the enemy isn't playing your game. Sometimes, while you are trying to be silent, they are simply feeling the water rise. The listeners were being listened to. The collectors were being collected. And somewhere, in the deep places beyond the sight of sun or stars, a new understanding had emerged. Nothing truly disappears without leaving a trace. This is the Cold War Chronicles. I'm your narrator. We declassify the past to understand the present. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more Cold War era videos.